This is why you've got more vocations in St. John Cantius than in the whole of the rest of the Archdiocese of Chicago. Did you know the secular press are not interested in the huge scandals that surround this papacy?
I'd forgotten about some of these guys that have been given a pass, that have been protected by this pontificate, even though they were credibly charged and in some cases convicted of sexual crimes, financial crimes, or other crimes. I've forgotten about all that. I've forgotten about the Pachamama Vatican garden scandal. I've forgotten about all this stuff. And Damian reminds us of that.
By the way, my name is Joe McLean. I host a radio program called A Catholic Take, where we look at the world through a Catholic lens. I'd love for you to hang out with us. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and let us know what you think in the comments below.
We just can't do it anymore. We just can't pretend that bad things aren't happening in this pontificate in particular, and that bad men need to be called out, because the cockroaches need to know that they don't own the kitchen. We flip on the light of Christ. Mark Lambert joins us now. Mark, good morning to you. Thank you for your time today.
Hey, Joe, thanks for having me on.
I want to start with your recent tour here in the United States. I would love to get your perspective. You've been on both sides of the pond, so to speak. How do you see the church in the United States versus the church in UK or Europe at large?
Well, generally speaking, I'd say much healthier. It's probably in a really dire state here in the UK in particular. And I think there are a lot of similarities, but also there's a lot of contrasts. And obviously, when we were asked to come over, and the people who asked us to come over were going to be Orthodox and faithful Catholics. So we probably saw a lot of the best of it. We did actually have one experience where we went to Oklahoma. We were invited to meet Jordan Peterson. I don't know if you know, but Catherine, part of our team, has got a little friendship with Tammy. And so Jordan was speaking in Oklahoma. So we flew down in the middle weekend. And when we flew back, we were looking for somewhere near to where we were staying in downtown Chicago. And the only place we could find was Holy Name Cathedral. So having spent the week, we'd been to all these wonderful churches in the surrounding area, in the Chicago area. And we ended up going to Holy Name, and it was a bit of a culture shock, because the liturgy was, it's so stereotypical, isn't it? It's that kind of, old ladies running everything, horrible discordant music, no one joining in any of the responses, everyone wearing masks, no altar servers whatsoever. Wow. And we were contrasting that to St. John Cantius, where we'd been to Mass a couple of times during our stay, where you've got like every Mass that you go into, you've got 12 young men all really with their chests out, really proudly. They want to be there. And this is the vocations crisis written large for us, isn't it? You can see that the young men at St. John Cantius, they want to be part of the community. They want to serve God. And at Holy Name Cathedral, which you would expect, being the Superchis Cathedral, you would expect that to be the vanguard, the standard bearer for the kind of liturgy that they wanted to push out across the Archdiocese. And instead, you've got this plinky plonky, no young people at all, never mind altar servers involved. Yeah. And I think that's a stark contrast, isn't it? And sort of speaks to what you're talking about there a little bit, doesn't it?
This morning I saw this article. Maybe I saw this article yesterday by Catholish.de. The headline says, "Clown Dance and Protest. Women Celebrate Deaconess's Day in Speyer Cathedral in Germany." So we know that one of the bishops recently there tried to, ordain these 13 women. We even gave them certificates. It was a big fun day for them, apparently, in hopes of influencing Holy Mother Church to one day actually ordain, because they weren't actually ordained. But these women were protesting the fact that they can't be ordained. And how do they do it? With a clown show. This is how they protested the Holy Mother Church, putting on clown noses and doing a dance during the Liturgy of the Word. Like, they can't even help themselves. Is this just the boomer generation in its last death throes, Mark? I mean, I'm getting to be an older guy, so I even hate criticizing, the older generation, but it would seem like the boomer generation is really had its way with Holy Mother Church now for the past 6 decades. Is it almost over?
It's really interesting. It's a conversation that I have all the time, and I'm with you, Joe. I'd really like to think that it is coming to an end. And certainly you see all over the world, wherever I go in the world, you see that it's dying. You know, that kind of liturgy just kills the church. And it's funny because on Monday, I run a Bible study, funnily enough, at my local Baptist church. And we had a new member join our Bible study who was an ex-Catholic. And she was shocked that I was a Catholic, like someone had invited her from the Baptist service. And she ended up sort of really going at it with me. And we were talking about liturgy, and that is her experience of liturgy, is that bland. She couldn't understand, she couldn't connect it to scripture. She couldn't connect it to the Bible. She couldn't connect it to her life. You know, it just didn't seem to mean anything. And so that's what she was that's what she'd rebelled or rejected, and instead found a relationship with Christ much more in analysing the scripture a little bit more closely. So I think that it has killed us. You know, I think that sort of attitude and trivializing the mass, but that's not to say that you can't see what they were trying to do. You know, very clearly, if you study Vatican II, there's lots of good stuff in there, and that it was a genuine attempt, I think, to reach out and try and, you know, become more relevant. All right, but we've tried that now and it doesn't work. So can we go back to having beautiful, sensible liturgy now, please?
I would say there was an overreaction in many ways to be more relevant. I think, and this brings me to Damian Thompson, a friend of yours, article over at Unherd. The scandals haunting Pope Francis, scheming cardinals are sharpening their knives. This was fire and brimstone, this article. I mean, I read it a few times at least and had now a few conversations about it. He lays the wood. And I interviewed Damian Thompson, I don't know, 3-4 years ago or something. And I remember him telling me about his experience being at the hotel there where the Pope lives at the Vatican behind St. Peter's Basilica. And he was there for like a week. And his assessment of Pope Francis then, and again, this was like 4 years ago, was that this was a godfather. This guy is a godfather. He wants to put his thumb on the pulse and know what all the rumors are, and he's really trying to control the situation. Well, this Unherd article seems to lay the wood and really be forceful in that. What was your take on Damian's article?
Yeah, I thought it was really good. It's long, as you say, tomish. And Damian keeps his finger on the pulse. So, you know, certainly he hits a lot of the right notes there that I've had the same information, you know, we know. And what he's trying to do, his big bugbear is the fact that the press don't seem to be interested. You know, the secular press are not interested in the huge scandals that surround this papacy. And he contrasts that with the fact that certainly at the end of Pope Benedict XVI's papacy, that the press were all over it. Anything, you know, even if it wasn't a scandal, they'd make it into a scandal. They were desperate to bring him down. And I think just that contrast tells you something, doesn't it? The big puzzle for me is why the secular press, you know, jumped at every scandal that they could, or every potential scandal with Benedict XVI, you know, the Butler thing and Vatican leaks and all that. And yet they seem to be ignoring massive, massive problems with Pope Francis's papacy. And all you can assume, looking at it as objectively as possible, is that Pope Francis has aligned himself with a lot of the progressive political, especially the political agenda, but theologically as well. He put even if the actual doctrinal teachings don't match up to the rhetoric, he certainly puts it out there that he's, you know, a more progressive. I mean, take, for example, the recent Dignitas Infinita, where you know, I think we can all be pleased with the statements that have condemned transgenderism and, you know, various other dodgy things that we all knew were obviously a problem. But Pope Francis has gone through a series of meetings with trans people and affirming them and saying, you know, God loves you the way that you are and all this sort of thing. And so you've got constantly throughout the papacy these contradictory and confusing messages. So it's very little wonder that people are confused about. And this is, I can't see what he is doing, Joe, apart from undermining the faith. That's all this can serve to do. And I think Damian points out really brilliantly the reasons for that. And, he says that as someone who was, born through Juan Perón's primacy in Argentina, he's very much a Peronist. He's got that sort of that sort of language that speaks in favour of the poor people. But really all that matters to him is power. And Damian builds up that picture with a number of examples from sources in the Vatican who said that, he's like basically some of the best quotes were he's going around lighting fires and putting them out. And if you watch Catholic Unscripted, I don't know how many episodes you've watched, but I do it with the former Queen's Chaplain, Gavin Ashenden and Catherine Bennett. And Gavin and I have had these arguments ongoing over the years, where Gavin's sort of been absolutely convinced that there's this Machiavellian plot and the Pope is some super genius, who's set up to take the papacy down. And my position has been, no, he's just a lunatic. He's just like a mad old parish priest.
Coming up in August in Niagara Falls, Buffalo, New York, our backyard, our hometown here at the Station of the Cross, Candace Owens, Raymond Arroyo, Bishop Joseph Strickland, Father Robert Mateg, Mother Miriam, myself, Jim Havens, and even producer Jake. The whole team is going to be at the 25th anniversary conference and gala in Niagara Falls. We want you to be there too. We haven't yet opened anything up, so I might even get in trouble for telling you this early, but it's going to be a great time. So be on the lookout. We'll tell you when you can actually register and be a part of that. But that is coming up August the 24th in Niagara Falls. Put that on your calendar. We're having a conversation not just about Damian Thompson and the current pontificate and all the scandals that are surrounding it. We're having a conversation with Mark Lambert from the Catholic Unscripted team. It's a podcast that I actually love, and I check out their content all the time. I encourage you to do so as well. We're going to be linking to it in the show notes over at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. Mark, welcome back to the team again. Thank you for your time today. So one of the things that Damian in his article really made me remember was just like, he doesn't not even give an exhaustive list. He just kind of still surveys it. But it's like we've forgotten about so many issues that have happened in the church. I've forgotten about some of the names of the men, Zinketa, for instance, and others, not just the Marco Rupnik story that is horrible, diabolic, and disgusting. The guy still is in good standing, by the way, still is called father, still has a role to play in the church. Bishop Strickland gets retired. Let that contrast sink in for a moment. But I've forgotten about some of these guys that have been given a pass, that have been protected by this pontificate, even though they were credibly charged and in some cases convicted of sexual crimes, financial crimes, or other crimes. I've forgotten about all that. I've forgotten about the Pachamama Vatican garden scandal. I've forgotten about all this stuff. And Damian reminds us of that. And it's like it's a never-ending thing in the last 11 years, wouldn't you say?
There's so much of it. I think that's the thing. And, like when you mentioned Rupnik, for example, Rupnik is a world of scandal all on its own. It's just extraordinary that they just don't even talk about it. And what's amazing is the fact that he coerced his victims into sort of liturgical sex acts. And Pope Francis is listed this month as a Vatican consultant on divine worship, of all things. I'm not going to say the exact things that Rupnik got up to in his abuse because it's too disgusting. But, what on earth is going on? The whole thing with Francis's papacy for me has been, I've lived a life as a Catholic, I'm sort of in my mid-50s now, and all my life I've relied on the church for sanity and for careful thought, that the church moves slowly and carefully about these issues. I remember when Fiducia Supplicans came out at Christmas, I was like, what? It's like, when, Anglicans were discussing about this about blessing same-sex couples in their synodal process that they've got going on. Yeah. And it was like we leapfrogged them and went straight to, DEFCON, right? Without any sort of movement. And it's just extraordinary. And then you add all the incredible fallout. And all you can hope, and this is what I hear, is that rather than have a big embarrassing fight, because that will further undermine the papacy. Yeah. So if there's public dissent, if there's public, it causes great pain to the office of the papacy. And we can all see that it undermines the authority, the teaching authority of the Pope, that the cardinals are just keeping their powder dry. You know, there's got to be a conclave soon. It's not worth damaging the office any further. But you have to hope that they can see everything that we can see.
That's one of the things that I heard you guys talking about that on the most recent Catholic Unscripted too, about the bishops in England versus Bishop Strickland, who got relieved because he was so outspoken. Praise be to God for his outspokenness. You know, to your point, they're just hoping to make it to the next conclave. And it seems like that conversation is now taking an uptick because a lot of guys in red hats are already starting to lobby, to politic for that next conclave. They're wanting to get the nod. And Damian talks about this in his article. Fernandez, his reputation seems to be shot post Fiducia Supplicans. Cardinal Parolin, one of the more powerful prelates in the church today, but rumor has he's got cancer, so he probably won't get the nod unless they just want a really short pontificate, which is, you know, possible, I suppose. The cardinal from the Congo, his reputation has gone up. His property values have increased. But it seems like Damian is indicating that a lot of people are looking east for the next cardinal to take the white habit out of the conclave. And yet, on the American side, you know, Cardinal Cupich, I was told by a Vatican insider back in 2020 that he was the kingmaker, that nothing happened in America unless he approved of it or pushed it. So he was the guy in America, but it seems like his star is falling. He's about to retire. Cardinal McElroy seems to be on the rise, and a lot of people are very concerned about that. How do you see those names lining up for the next conclave?
Well, I think we're all interested in this, aren't we? You know, and I don't think it's disrespectful because we are whatever, just in terms of time, we're coming to the end of this papacy. And there are a lot of interesting factors that the Pope really has brought about himself. So people are saying, well, he stacked the conclave, you know, but as Damian points out in his article in Unherd, he's missed his opportunity here. And really, it could be that Fiducia Supplicans was the thing that has destroyed his potential for getting Pope Francis II in the next conclave, because he's basically gathered up the Africans, hasn't he, against him, and that's a big block, and probably the Asians as well, you know. So if you add those two together, you need a 2/3 majority out of 127 cardinal electors to be able to move forward with any candidate. So that's going to be a massive problem. And I thought that the bit that Damian put in there was really interesting about, you know, that the Pope used to hang around at a particular hotel where the gay gossip goes on, basically, and that this is why it's not that he himself is you know, same-sex attracted, but that it's you know, as you were saying, with the abusers that he promotes, and he's got a huge amount of homosexualists in his, you know, in his cardinal, in his circle. And these are people that he can manipulate, this, which is the Peronist model again, isn't it? That it's all about power, ultimately, and that's what he uses to manipulate people. I think, like, Cupich is really interesting because, exactly as you say, he's a hardline leftist, and every time we go to Chicago, we see this, you know, from the clergy there. And what's interesting is, and I think we've got to be careful, you know, when you're saying, well, we got to just speak out now. You've got to remember that for a lot of the parish priests, what's the most important thing that they do? And that's to give the sacraments and to teach the faith. And we know lots of good clergy in Chicago who are just keeping their heads down, and they've learned how to deal with Cupich, you know, and that is that you have to eat crow when you're told to eat crow, keep your head down. As long as you don't embarrass him, then you can work within your parish. And you know, some of these young guys, not long ordained, are saying to us, we're watching our community grow through good liturgy, through good teaching, through the sacraments, you know, and that's so. What's the future for the church? You can see that beautifully playing out, that it's orthodoxy and it's the real message of the gospel. And when we preach and teach what the church teaches, what the church has always taught, that bears fruit. It's not complex. It's not any more complicated than that. And it's all this confusion, really, that is the problem when it comes to developing the gospel and growing the family, you know, the kingdom of God. So I think Supic now is on his way out. I think my feeling is, what I've sort of been told, is that he promised Francis that he would deliver the American bishops, and he's failed bluntly in that. So now he's out of favour, and Francis is fickle like that. So that kind of makes sense to me.
You have some insider information. Was I told you have insider information? Is that true? Are you gonna spill the beans on something?
One of the things that there are a couple of things actually. One of the things is I loved the bozo from Gozo in Damian Thompson. That was one of my favourite bits about Cardinal Grech. And I have actually I wrote a story about him in 2017 and got a solicitor's letter as a result of it. I had some inside information that he was protecting predator priests on the island. Of course. And that's come back to life in the last month or so. And I've actually got a number of official documents now that demonstrate that was accurate, and that he's actually paid hush money to the victims and stuff like that. So I'm going to be writing an article. I'll let you know when that comes out.
Yes, please.
With real evidence, so hopefully that will... I know that certainly the Maltese are worried, those who know him, because he's got a reputation of being very dodgy and a real bully in Gozo.
Wasn't he the guy that gave us the definition of Amoris Laetitia first? Like he defined it first? Yeah,
well, and I think there was sort of a competition going on between him and Scicluna about who could be the most toady to Pope Francis. They're both very ambitious guys. But I think because Grech is such a bozo, I don't think anyone expected him to actually win. Scicluna's got brains and, some integrity. So I think everyone was a bit surprised when Grech was made the cardinal, and Scicluna is apparently sort of withdrawn now and just living the life of a Renaissance prince. Locked up in the palace. So, but the other thing was that confirmation. So basically, I do know that for some amount of time, Damian mentioned you hung sick from South Korea, and apparently Parolin isn't in the running from what I hear at all. He has got cancer. He doesn't look very well, and that's a bit of an open secret in Rome. And he is actually backing the South Korean cardinal, so who's been in the running for quite some time, and he's a fairly decent candidate, so someone to look up to. Damian also mentioned Cardinal Erdo, but I don't think that is very likely. But I do think Wim Ejik, E-I-J-K, the guy from the Netherlands, who's the Archbishop of Utrecht. Now, he is Papabile. He has got a lot of support apparently among the Curia, and he's the guy who led the revolt against Fiducia Supplicans. Do you remember, from the Dutch revolt? So, what I'm saying is, if you look at the way it's lining up, if you've got an anti-same-sex blessing, an anti-Fiducia Supplicans block, Ejik could be a man if it's going to be someone from Europe. The other guy is Mendonca, who wasn't mentioned at all. And I think Mendonca, who really does stand a chance of getting elected, he's a very well-rounded kind of European, and he could bring straight away all the Portuguese sort of speaking cardinals with him. So a few little names there that perhaps weren't in the article or haven't been mentioned.
One of the things about Damian's article, it kind of gave me more hope. Now, I was in Rome back in November, and I got to hang out with Edward Penton for a moment or two, and I was interviewing him, and as part of my documentary film that I released. But we one of the things we talked about was, I asked him, I said, "Listen, you wrote the book on the Papabile, right? You were lining up the characters for the next conclave." I said, "But that's been out now more than a year. What do you think now?" Et cetera, et cetera. So we're having that conversation. He said, "Well, you may be surprised. Even though the deck got stacked for the College of Cardinals, you may be surprised that the next guy is going to rein things in, no matter what." And I'm like, okay, I want to believe that, but I'm not so sure. Damian's article, I would argue, convinced me more. I think Damian did a great job. You took it further just a minute ago, but I think Damian did a great job of sort of pointing out that the Pope, in trying to stick it to the West, was elevating these red hats in like tiny little corners of the world that normally wouldn't have them, while rejecting other parts of the world that would normally have them. He wasn't able to pick the most liberal man he could possibly find. He had to sort of settle for some other guys that weren't as liberal. He says, so number one, it's not a complete modernist liberal lineup, number one. Number two, a lot of these guys just aren't, maybe they've seen the light. Maybe it's been one scandal too far for them. And they probably can't bring themselves to continuing that agenda. So two thoughts come to mind is, one, we may get a more mainstream go along to get along guy. But then the other thought was, will the Wolves take advantage of a man like that? If all that guy wants to do is play the middle ground and probably won't be as forceful, something you said in the Catholic Unscripted, you pointed out from Damian's article that this is a pope that rules by fiat, executive orders, right? He just issues these motu proprios and get her done. Similar to the Biden administration, same thing here in the United States, same thing, executive orders, just get her done. Obama was notorious for it as well. So if the next guy, and I want to get your take on this, if the next guy is middle of the road, he doesn't rock the boat too much, will he be taken advantage of by the bad actors in that, or will he hold the ground and keep them at bay? What do you think?
I think the key thing to the way that the bad actors play out is money. And this is the thing, you see, I think there are people at play in the Vatican who don't particularly care about the faith, but what they do care about is money. And Pope Francis has been a financial disaster. He's been every kind of a disaster, whatever way you look at it. I mean, as a result of Dignitas Infinita, now you've got James Martin and all the progressive left wing all attacking him. And this was said right at the beginning of this papacy, that he wouldn't please the left or the right. And that, he said it himself, Hagen Loy, make a mess. And that, I think, if there's one thing that's true, it's that. That's what he's done. He's made a mess. And
a big one.
It's just is my sense of it that no one wants to see a replay of Francis. I don't think you'd have to be mental to want a Francis too.
Is the West lost? And as the church goes, so goes society. So if in a new pontificate with a stronger pope, let's say best case scenario, do we see a resurgence in society, especially in those cultures that used to be strong Catholic cultures? France, I'm thinking of you. Italy, Spain, I'm thinking of you. And will the UK ever be great again?
Well, who knows? It's certainly a battle for the culture. And the only way to win it, the only possible way we can win it, is like the men of the West in Lord of the Rings before the gates of Mordor, if we all join with the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church is where this battle, we're the only ones who can have this fight and win it, have got any chance of winning it. And so, that's what we need to start getting serious about this and building back the culture. And we've seen it very much in Scotland, even in the last week or two. On the 10th of April, we had in England, so everyone laughs in America about our socialised healthcare system, the NHS. But the NHS had a brilliant coup at the beginning of April when they released the CAS review. Someone had the bottle to actually ask the question whether transgender ideology was good or bad for children. And they funded a review into the practice that was going on of medicating and operating on young people, and the review took a very harsh line. And you could say that it's a return to science and facts and objective truth, And as a result of that, even this week, we've seen Scotland rowing back drastically on some, because they have passed a law, I don't know if you know, like a self-ID law there. So they're trying to remove parents as the first educators of children, put the state in that place. So there are little things that you can see. The question is, can we get behind it? And as you rightly said at the top of the show, we need to be speaking out about these things. And that's why I'm so furious with our bishops, really, that this has been going on for over a decade in the UK and probably in America as well, this transgender thing, for example. Yeah. We all know what the church teaches, and it's very clear. And the antidote, isn't it? What the church teaches is the antidote. In fact, Pope Benedict spoke out about it before he resigned from the pontificate. And yet our bishops have been absolutely silent. In fact, they've been pushing the opposite. They've been affirming transgender, and even now they've issued a document saying that it's, like, I think I said in the last Catholic Unscripted, they've been buried in their trenches with their heads down, and then all the fighting goes on, and it goes a bit quiet after the cash report, so they stick their heads up and go, "Oh, is it all? Oh, yeah, we agree with that as well." It's just awful.
Wow, and they're not leading the charge.
No,
exactly. Are they afraid? Are these bishops afraid of the government in the UK? Are they afraid of Pope Francis, thinking that they're not on the team? I mean, like, who are they afraid of? Are they afraid of their own shadows? Are they just emasculated, fearful cowards?
Things,
or
yeah, I think there's a bit of all of that. There's definitely this weird thing, and it's the same in Chicago. Like, we found this in Chicago. So, like, the lady who's in charge of Catholic relief services I know my really good friend Michael Hitchborn and the work that he's done with exposing some of the problems with Catholic relief services. Yeah. So, and part of that was proven to us in Chicago, where we were talking to someone who's really involved in that sort of work, and they said it's disastrous. Sue Pitch has sidelined good, faithful Catholics and put in charge someone who's openly pro-trans, pro all these horrible things and against what the church teaches, and they're in charge now of CRS. So if you've got these people at the head of these organisations, is it any surprise that they're going to be pushing agendas that are in contradiction to what the church teaches?
No. Yeah, absolutely not, which is why we have to be careful about who we collaborate with. Professionally, privately, otherwise. One of the lessons in a talk I gave at a Catholic school just the other day to 1,600 kids is be careful who your friends are. Rudolf Höss is a great example. He had a lot of Nazi friends that helped him make very bad decisions, and it was only on his deathbed that he was able to repent for those. So don't wait that long, right? We shouldn't be hiring crazy people to do crazy things. We should just hold the Catholic faith. It's that simple. Instead of wanting, in America, I think the bigger problem is, these organizations, these 501c3, organizations in the Catholic Church, they've been getting drunk off the government teat. They've been getting a lot of money, billions of dollars, and they don't want to see the gravy train stop. So, you want me to work with Satan? Okay, no problem. I'll work with Satan, whatever it takes. Just give me the check. It's like, it's just not going to fly.
We were told that again in Chicago. Someone said this is why the bishops in America are frightened to speak out against Biden and his support for abortion, because they're getting a lot of money from the government, and this becomes a problem. And it's really interesting, isn't it? Because it's a more Marxist system. If you're taking money from the government, you're less likely to speak out about it when they do bad things.
Yeah, amen. Chris says, I am seeing the young priests coming out of the seminary being formed properly, conservatively in the faith with an understanding of the true church. Joe, do you and Mark see this on a national basis? Mark, what do you say?
Yes, and on an international basis, thank God. We've got, it terrifies me. I'm friends with we haven't got a lot of seminarians, but the few, as a majority of the ones that we've got. And what you see is young men, incredibly brave young men who are aware of how difficult things are and who have got a deep love for Christ, and they've got a deep vocation to bring that out and to share it with people, And when you've got an experience of Christ working in your life, then you want to share that. It's natural that when you've got an understanding of that efficacy of our faith in your life, it's something that you want to share because you know the good that it will do to other people. And that's what I see in the young men, like the vast majority of young men that I see coming out of seminary these days. And it makes me believe what Pope Benedict predicted, 50 odd years ago, that the church, we might see it's not going to have any, like when you look at the vocations crisis, it made me really think about this on Good Shepherd Sunday, the other Sunday, where you think you've got the church is forming these young men, and we've got Oscott Seminary in England, in Birmingham, which is a really good seminary. And I know the guys have really good formation there. And then they come out, and it's like the diocese are trying to break them. They put them into difficult positions. They've got no support. They try and manipulate them to do things that they don't want, that sort of they feel are against the work of the gospel and stuff like that. They just get criticised all the time. The parishes don't want orthodoxy, they want to be Anglicans, whatever. And so it's incredibly hard for a young 20-year-old man to navigate all of this and to hear hundreds of confessions, all the problems of the world on his shoulder, to have answers for everyone. I mean, it's no one. I mean, who would want to go in for that? It's absolutely ridiculous. And so the young men are really heroic who are coming out. And the problem that we've got is that I think it doesn't matter how many Hail Marys we say for vocations. If the church has got this wrong, and if they're not this is that you could go on for hours. This is the whole Traditionis Custodes thing, isn't it? That the thing that sparked it all off was the fact that the Italian bishops couldn't get any vocations. Why? Because they were all going to the ICKSP in Florence, and because young men want something to believe in. They want something to lay their life down for. They want beautiful liturgy. This is why you've got more vocations in St. John Cantius than in the whole of the rest of the Archdiocese of Chicago. Ooh. I shouldn't say that. It's an embarrassing Supich, and I don't want him to do anything against the canons of St. John Cantius.
Neither do they, and neither do we, but nonetheless, it is pretty awesome. Honeybee says, pray for my boy about to be ordained in June. We will pray. That also reminds me, like, how many parents, you said a second ago, like, it's not just pray Hail Marys for vocations, right? Like, where do vocations come from? They come from families. They come from the home. A home, a mom and a dad who demonstrate, love for Holy Mother Church, for the faith, devotion, commitment, sacrifice, perseverance, and then, of course, you couple that with the point you made a minute ago, Mark, about why there's more vocations in the ICKP than there is in the local dioceses, is because the traditional mass is a masculine mass. It's demonstrable. It's not emotional like the ladies in Germany with their clown noses trying to protest the church. It's not this emotional roller coaster, the church of what's happening now, the church of how do I feel, it's all about me kind of experience. This is about self-sacrifice, about being so intentional that you actually care about every single movement, every stroke, everything you say and do in the Mass. It's all about giving God your absolute best, even though your best can never truly satisfy, right? Like that's a masculine effort. These men see that, but here's the question. Why would parents want to give their kids, their sons over in a day and an age where there's just scandal after scandal? And too many bishops are sitting on that fence and refusing to take a stand. Why would a mom and a dad want to give their sons to that?
Well, and if you're engaged in the faith to the point where you're paying attention to what's going on, you recognize the fact that there is there's a sort of a gay plague, if you like, within the clergy. And, you're going to give your son over to that, to the potential grooming and abuse of seminarians. And that's what I really do think that prediction from Benedict XVI, could be the future, that because it will just collapse if they keep going the way they're going. Under the trajectory of Pope Francis, it really makes me think that the whole thing will just fall down and we'll end up, with a much purer, smaller church. And let's face it, they're most of the bishops now, they're just managing decline. You've got all over the United States as well as in the UK, you've got this program of managing decline where they're selling off church buildings and, the Muslims are taking over. So God help us all.
Yeah, God help us all. You guys in England have been privileged to have centuries-old, beautiful churches, some of which have been stolen by the Protestant Revolution and then repurposed, but some still remain today and are icons of beauty, goodness, and truth. In America, we have a few of those, but we also have 60 years of the church in the round, spaceship, ugly, Novus Ordo, post-Vatican II buildings. Do you see a renaissance in architecture and church and beauty and art and all the rest in the West, and especially in Europe?
Well, I'd like to think so. I don't see much evidence of it at the moment. I think we're in a worse position than you are. You have to remember that the Catholic hierarchy was only reinstated in 1850, so it was sort of illegal to be a Catholic here before then. And the Anglicans nicked all of our churches. So anything built before 1970 is Anglican, basically. When the hierarchy was re-established, the great cardinal that we had then said, build schools, not churches, because he understood that education was the spear point of evangelization. So we've got all spaceships, basically, There are very few non-spatial churches. But we've got lots of beautiful cathedrals. And I don't know if you've seen that one of the things that's been going on here is this horrible silent disco thing, because there's no one going to church in the Church of England. They've basically been renting them out to this company who do silent discos in the nave. And there's a wonderful group. I gave so there's Catholic Man UK. I don't know if there's a Catholic Man US, but and basically I did a talk at their retreat a few months ago, and as a result of that, this brilliant young doctor, there's an interview on our channel with him, decided to set up a thing protesting at these raves in the nave or whatever they are. So they're going all over the country basically and saying, like, you know, you're desecrating sacred ground. And there are people, you know, like famous people buried in our cathedrals, and they're hundreds and hundreds of years old, and they're just treating them like dance halls. It's just crazy.
Yeah. That's indicative of a pagan culture, wouldn't you say? Like that to me screams secular, pagan. They've lost, like even like the Anglican cause is lost. You know what I mean? Like, it's how bad it is. Like, they haven't been able to capture the heart and mind of the people, and it's become just another secular country. It's really, really tragic. Let me ask you about your reflection, because I was thinking about this not that long ago. When Benedict XVI, God rest his soul, visited the UK, and he went into Westminster, didn't he make a statement that seemed to like go off like a nuclear explosion? Like, this is a Catholic church. This is a Catholic building. Like, you know, tell me about that. Like, what was that like from your perspective?
It was extraordinary, because I think everyone, like the bishops are so rubbish here and the Anglican bishops are even worse. And so I think everyone was thinking it'd be a nice fluffy little thing when he came into Parliament, and that they could pat him on the head and send him on his way. And there were lots of inside reports that came out in the newspapers afterwards where MPs were literally, their jaws dropped, because what he had to say was so pertinent and so powerful that it affected everyone. You could see everyone in the room. It was like electricity, you know. It's well worth looking it up. You can look it up on the Vatican website and read through what he had to say. But like everything with Benedict, it's gold, and we will be poring over it in 100 years' time for what we can learn from it.
Yeah, I mean, just this morning, I found my long-lost Evelyn Waugh, Edmund Campion, alike. This is so good. This book is a page turner. This is one of my secret projects. Is I would make a live action biopic of Evelyn Waugh's life. I think that would be dramatic and amazing on the big screen. I would do that if I had George Soros's money. But Edmund Campion would be ashamed of what's going on in England today if to discover that, one, they were doing raves in the nave. That would just, like, he would rave about that. And then number two, these bishops that weren't standing up and weren't taking a stand and even dying, like Margaret Clitheroe, all of these incredible English saints. I can't imagine if they were to be walking the earth today that they would tolerate what they're seeing. The fact that other Catholics today can't seem to understand that. Like, the martyrs that gave their life, drawn and quartered, the blood of Edmund Campion splattered on a guy, and that guy went and became a priest, and 10 years later was also drawn and quartered because of the witness of Edmund Campion. You know what I mean? Like, it seems so schizophrenic. How do you explain that outside of diabolic harassment?
Well, the worst thing was COVID, Joe. I don't know if you felt the same, but over here, that they could not wait to shut the churches, and the imagery was the worst thing. So, you know, that like in our parish, thank God I go to a good parish, but I'm constantly saying, it's something that I learned in Chicago. Actually, was at Marytown. They put out a prie-dieu, so if you want to kneel for communion, you can kneel. And I was I've been trying to encourage people in England to do the same thing, because we want to encourage reverence, don't we? We don't want to encourage, profanity. We want to encourage reverence, and so that people can recognise what they're doing when they go out for communion. And in COVID, not only, did they they put out a prie-dieu, but they reversed it. And this was a directive from the Bishops' Conference. So they used the kneeler as something to create distance between you and the altar. And it was just the whole thing. And then they shut the churches completely. And it was like you were supposed to watch it on television, like that was any kind of a replacement for receiving
tragic.
the sacrament. And it's the bishop saying, oh, the sacraments don't matter much. And now they're all moaning because no one's come back, because there's a massive shortfall in the amount of people, not in my parish, thank God, but in a lot of parishes, Little wonder at it, because you spent 2 years telling them that it didn't matter. So how can you be surprised when people believed you, when people said that it didn't matter? I just think it's so, and like you say, the blood of the martyrs, it's just appalling, the legacy that we've got. So burn it all down. It will burn, it's not sustainable the way that it is. They're only interested in going out for lunch or whatever. So, burn it all down and we'll build the church again. There's a brilliant quote. I don't know if you heard it from Ronald Knox that I was using. Monsignor Ronald Knox, the famous.
I've got his Bible over there, his translation.
Brilliant. When I was in Chicago, this was one of the quotes to say that this is a pattern of the church, and he said, even the church herself repeats through the ages in a mystical sense the history of her divine master. She lives through 100 deaths and 100 resurrections. She died under the persecutions and rose again with Constantine. She died under the barbarian invasions and rose again with Charlemagne. She died under the European apostasy of the 16th century and rose again with the Catholic reaction which followed on then. So, this is what the church does. And perhaps best summed up in Cardinal George's famous quote, that he'll die in his bed, his successor will die in prison, and his successor will be killed, and then his successor will pick up the broken pieces and rebuild society, because this is what we do as Catholics. This is what the Catholic Church does. It builds culture, it builds society, it builds the family. And, this is what we need to, this is the hope that lives inside of us. We know that this is the case. And whatever chaos we're living through, we've got to hang on to that hope and that truth.
Amen. Amen. Okay, speaking of dying and rising, can we all just agree right here and right now? Let's take a vote. Marco Rupnik's art should die, right? We agree. It should die. It should be dead. We should burn it. We should get rid of it. And yet there's a debate within the church, well, do we really want to? Do I really want to pay to have all this? Yes, 100%. Do it for your soul. You can't serve God and mammon. Get rid of the art. Mark, do you think Padre Pio's tomb is bedecked in Marco Rupnik art? Shouldn't they strip it all out? Better to have concrete bare walls than to have that artwork up.
Yeah, let's have a bit of Jansenism. I'm all for that. Lourdes is the place. I met my wife in Lourdes in 1989, and that's what the whole frontage there of the Rosary Basilica is all Rupnik artwork. And I've never liked it. It looks like aliens with the three eyes, the black eyes, and all that. I always thought it was a bit rubbish. And so I don't even know why we're having this. Well, we know why we're having it is because Austin Ivory is the one who's sort of saying that it should all be fine, because he's an apologist for everything that's evil in the church, basically, isn't he?
Well, it's ugly. Go ahead, Jake.
I saw an interesting observation about how I think I may have posted the screenshot in the AC Insiders chat as well. But someone was saying that for men, as we've been talking about, for men of a certain age, Rupnik's art is kind of the official art of the Vatican II spirit and the Reform and all of that. And so ripping it out is kind of admitting that some part of it was wrong. Yeah, it's and I argued it also doesn't. Yes, it matters, but it also doesn't matter that he was a horrible, evil abuser and he incorporated it into his art. It's also really ugly, alien-looking art, like you said, Mark. Exactly. I love that comparison.
100%.
It's also just ugly art. Even if he was a decent, average boomer priest type of thing, rip that art out. It's ugly and it distracts and it's
uglifies everything. Forget about all the drama.
Yeah.
Let's remember that. Do you remember the World Meeting of the Families and that horrible image, which was two men with their heads, and their eyes, or three eyes, and we didn't even know who Marco Rupnik was at that point. But I can remember everyone I knew said, "What is this horrific?" Monstrosity. Is this the best we could do? And so, I think that it's just on the merits of the artwork, exactly as you said, let's get rid of it. It's awful. Yeah,
that's what I said to Austin Ivory, too, when he made that comment on X. I'm like, I go, put his crimes to the side for a second. It's just ugly. Get rid of it. But then you add the crimes on, and I'm sorry, that's yet another reason. Because you alluded to that during our radio side of our show today. The crimes that Rupnik has committed are horrific. I mean, diabolical. In fact, tomorrow on the show is Kyle Clement. He works with exorcists, and he's going to talk in general terms, not specificity, but he's going to be talking about how there are demonic cults within the clergy in certain seminaries and, seminary and formation institutions, even famous ones may be like, for instance, in Rome, where this is a pattern that has been going on for a long time. You get guys, and we talked to, we had that conversation a couple of weeks ago with the lady who had been ritually abused by a priest out of the knack, and he admitted to his guilt. Well, that's just the tip of the iceberg. We're going to talk more about that with Kyle this week, as well as with Dr. Jennifer Roback Morris this week. And I guess Marco Rupnik is a shining example of a guy who wanted his harem, right? He wanted his private little harem, so he created his private little harem, and then he manipulated and abused these women in disgusting and horrific ways. And to tolerate that in any way, shape, or form is just, it's beside me. I just don't understand. But no matter what the cost is of getting rid of your Marco Rupnik artwork, I don't care. Get rid of it. Burn it to the ground. Don't be on that team. Go find more beautiful art. There are some incredible, I personally have tried to fan the flame of some great Catholic artists, and they're doing wonderful, beautiful work, actually inspiring. And so there's not like a shortage. There are people out there who can provide this. And why not give them a chance instead of Marco Rupnik? But Deborah says, that's just demonic and disgusting. Do you even know that like the details of the Marco Rupnik story are worse than you think? And by the way, the details of the story of the lady we talked to a couple of weeks back, who we are going to get back because there's more details she's not even revealed yet. She shared some of them with me. They are beyond pornographic and disgusting. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you how bad they are. Like, it's like you can't understand that level of evil. It really is just mind warping how evil some people can be.
Let's make him a consultant on divine worship.
Right.
Yeah, it's the natural thing to do, Joe. I don't know what the problem is.
Like, even if he wasn't guilty, like the fact that he makes that artwork would be evidence enough that you don't want this guy involved in liturgy, right?
Like, yeah, totally.
Oh man, did you like that video? It's okay. You can admit it. It's perfectly fine. Hey, we cover the big stories of our day, from inside the church to outside the church to all points in between, and we do it from a Catholic perspective. It's called A Catholic Take. It's a radio program Monday through Friday. We live stream it right here on this channel, by the way, so make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We would be very grateful to you. And don't forget, you're going to want to watch this video right here because you don't want to miss anything.